jugar y se burrola por arriba. Viene Kim Little. Atención Little. La bola para Russo. Russo de cara para Mariona. Mariona. ¡Qué golazo! De Mariona. Gol, 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 gol. Marca Mariona, marca el Arsenal. Estamos en el descuento de la primera. Lyon 0, Arsenal 2. Mariona!
Hello and welcome to the Arsenal Women Arsecast on Arseblog.com. And those of you that listen to us regularly, apologies that this is going to come out on Tuesday. I'm sure that you'd have loved it straight after the final whistle or on Sunday evening or ASAP. But obviously I had to fly back from Lyon, so we're recording on Monday evening. But some of these episodes, some of them after games, you know, London City Lionesses 1-0 winning the FA Cup, not a lot to say. Some of them can be quite painful, lots of kind of recriminations and things like that, and some of them are just a joy. And I think this one is going to fit very, very firmly into the latter category. And here to experience that joy with us, as ever, is our co-host Jamie Spanger. Jamie, Arsenal in the Champions League final in Lisbon on May the 24th. How does that sound?
Honestly, Tim, I can't wipe the smile off my face. Like, you repeating that has kind of like made it sink in a little bit, because yesterday, as soon as the final whistle went, it was just Skyscanner, like, get me to Lisbon. And then I woke up this morning and the feeling is just, I still don't know if it's sunk in, but it has sunk in. I've watched the game back twice, watched the highlights back 3 times. So I feel like I'm ready to speak about it. But Tim, Champions League finalists, how good?
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And it's, you know, obviously it's been, you know, look, I was there for the first one, you know, but obviously so long time's passed since then, and so much has changed as well since then. You know, that was 2-legged affair, the second leg at Boreham Wood, and, you know, this is going to be a different thing altogether. And yeah, just a great achievement, I think. And I think, I hope this doesn't sound too negative, but I think there's also a reality that kind of getting to the final does feel like a prize in itself, because I think we all understand how hard it's going to be to win the final. I'm not saying it would be impossible, but it's going to be really, really difficult. And so I think, you know, reaching the final in and of itself is a really big achievement. And, you know, I guess a personal reflection was in Linköping when they went out in the qualifier last season, and that was a tough mix zone, Jamie, looking at some of those players in the eye and not knowing how to look back at them, because you kind of don't want to look away, but at the same time, you know, you're hurt, they're hurt. It's kind of, those few seconds are difficult. And then last night it was all fist bumps, hugs. You know, everyone's got the endorphins flowing, and yeah, just those nights are a real pleasure. But we spoke about this a little bit last week on the podcast. I actually only gave us a 10% chance of doing this, so that serves me right. What was as we got closer to the game, what was your feeling? Did you think we could do it, or what was your feeling coming into it?
Yeah, honestly, Tim, like, I think when that final whistle ends in the first leg, I was feeling, look, it's a hard task. We played well, but it's Lyon. I think my real feeling this whole week, Tim, has been Lyon were in second gear. They were in second gear for that first leg. I didn't really know if they had played up to their maximum potential. So I was saying, look, it's a task. We're going to the Groupama Stadium. We're going away to Lyon. This is a really, really well-versed team stacked with potential. So I was saying, you know, we'll see, but I'm not confident. Sunday morning, no joke, Tim, every group chat, Adam Salter will listen to this podcast. He will have proof of me saying, guys, what are we worried about? We're winning. I was like, guys, don't worry about it. It's happening. We're winning. We'll be in Lisbon. It's fine. Something came over me on Sunday. It was definitely hopium and delusion. Like, it wasn't me being a prophet. So don't ask me to check the lotto numbers. But I think when the game came, I said, let's just give it a go. I think that this team is full of so much more than we think it is. And you know, we definitely saw that play out. But Tim, I think I was in a lucky position. I wasn't in the stadium, which is a very big disappointment as it stands with me. riding for the halfway line. Obviously, we're a non-for-profit as it stands, so like trips like this, it was just too expensive to justify. So I thought, look, there's a game against Barcelona. Chelsea are playing. I'll cover that. It'll be good fun at Stamford Bridge. So to have that distraction for 90 minutes was quite nice. And then the dash to a pub to go watch the Arsenal game with mates in front of the TV, that was when it kicked in. I was glad I had a distraction, but that hour before, absolute death, Tim.
And I don't think it's a game that Wendy Renard will look back on with great fondness for her 500th game. However, that kind of sorted me a little bit on the Saturday. But look, enough people spoke to me at the game. I kind of, and my kind of comments were, I think we can do it, but I'm not sure whether we will, because I had the same feeling as you, Jamie. I had that feeling that we probably, other than the first 20, 30 minutes, we probably only saw about 50% of Lyon. And I really thought we'd see more in the second leg. As it turns out, I think we probably saw even less of them. And we'll go on to Lyon in a minute, because they made some changes from the first leg, which I think backfired. But lineup, Daphne Van Domselaar came back in, Chloe Kelly in for Beth Mead. I mean, Daphne clearly not 100% fit. Her kicking in the last 15 minutes, I think the painkilling injection might have been wearing off by then. But I mean, I think you can see in the game why she's considered so important. Chloe Kelly coming in for Beth Mead. Any surprises for you there?
No, I think that front three, I really suspected. You tipped it last week saying it would be probably Beth Mead that falls out for Chloe Kelly. I think that was a full strength front three. I was glad to see Alessia fit and in training in the open session. The midfield, I guess, was a big talking point for everyone, wasn't it, Tim? Because I think we did suspect there to be a little bit of a reshuffle, because Arsenal couldn't really get on top of the midfield in the first leg. I was surprised to see Frida Maanum in the starting lineup. I really was. In the end, I guess everything's better in hindsight. We can't really criticize it now, considering how monumental every single person on the pitch was. But yeah, I was surprised by that midfield group for sure.
Yeah, I actually wasn't, which is not to, we spoke about it a lot last week after the first leg, which is not to say I didn't think there should be a change, but I think Renee is very Serena coded, if that makes sense. It's very, you talk about all the changes that she could make, and then the team lineup comes out and it's like, nope, same team pretty much. And I have to say, I listened to the Counterpressed episode last week, and they were talking about much the same, but I think Jessie Parker-Humphrey made a very good point about, well, actually in the first leg, Frida has 2 gilt-edged chances, and if she puts even one of them away, then Renee's selection is probably vindicated, and she probably planned for Frida to be a bit of a box crasher and to get some chances, and that did actually happen. It's just she didn't execute. But I think that's really the difference between the 2 legs. In the first leg, Arsenal don't execute. In this leg, they really execute. Before we go on to the beginning of the game, what about Lyon then? Because there was this question, I think, for them about what they'd do, because they played De Mornay as a kind of false 9 in the first leg, which I think worked pretty well. But Ada Hegerberg came on as a sub, made a good impact. So they started with Ada Hegerberg, dropped De Mornay back into midfield, dropped Daniela van der Donk to the bench. I mean, I'll preface this by saying nearly all the questions from the French press to Joe Montemuro were about this. And not only about this, but about why he didn't change it at half time. So clearly the kind of the line from the Lyon perspective is that they really felt that was a mistake. Were you surprised by it at all?
Yeah, can I be honest, Tim? I mentioned that little hour where I was dashing from Stamford Bridge to a pub in Fulham, and that was when I saw the Lyon lineup properly for the first time, and I was shocked by it. I was actually taken aback by the decision to play Ada Hegerberg, and that sounds ludicrous. She's a Ballon d'Or winner, one of the best female players in the world, but I didn't understand that decision. I think that there's a vulnerability in that Arsenal defence in the transition. There's a speed issue, there's a setup issue, and Melchi De Mornay is one of the most informed, if not one of the most informed forward right now in Europe, on the globe. So I didn't understand that, because I think that in the first leg, why it worked so well was Lyon already was sitting back quite passively. So it gave Hegerberg an opportunity to work in the build-up, whereas starting her straight on the 9, you're completely getting rid of that pace threat. And I didn't understand that from Montemuro. I wasn't saying, oh, this is great, Arsenal are going to win the game now, like it's going to be a big turnaround. But we saw that transpire in front of our eyes, Tim. And like you said, and I'm with the French press, I'm not angry about it like they are. However, I am so surprised that change didn't come earlier, because she couldn't make an impact and they were lacking it. I also think Melchi de Mornay is a great player, but playing her in the midfield and taking out Danielle van der Donk, I don't think van der Donk was exceptional in the first leg, but she provided an edge of physicality that no other midfielder did. And I think that gave players like Kim Little and Mariona Caldentey the time to be a lot more comfortable on the ball, and that had a massive effect on the game as well. So not only are you bringing in Hegerberg and getting rid of that fast-paced transition 9, you're also kind of taking away the physical aspect from the midfield. So I thought this was just really, really bad team selection, and we saw that play out.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that Lyon lost their press as well, because Ada Hegerberg, I mean, I was actually shocked to learn she's 29, which is just like incredible because of what she's achieved in the game. But I think you can see those knee injuries, unfortunately, have really taken their toll on her and what she's physically capable of. And I think Lyon lost their press as a result of that. I think De Mornay as well is a fantastic transitional off the ball threat. But if you're looking to control a midfield, that's not really what she does. And I think you're right. I think it allowed Kim Little and Mariona. They might have done it anyway, to be honest. And as much as we talked about the Arsenal midfield after the first leg, we talked about the Lyon midfield as well. We did say we felt that was an area where they look elite, but not super elite, perhaps. And I think that really bore out as well. But, Arsenal start pretty well. And that's something they definitely didn't do in the first leg. And I was pretty confident that wouldn't happen again, having had that first game and got it out their system. But then Arsenal score pretty early. I still don't really know what happens here. Does Vanessa Giles head it off Christiana Endler?
She's falling back, isn't she? She's like falling back and somehow hits her head and then goes into Endler's back. And they gave it on comms to Alessia Russo, which is ludicrous because she's nowhere near it. So no idea what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, blonde ponytail FC. We've all fallen victim to that before, I think. But, I mean, who cares? It went in. And, to see such a good goalkeeper like Tiani Endler, I don't think she looked that comfortable in the air in the first leg. A lot of those headers that Arsenal had were pretty close range and she didn't come and collect any of them. And this is a really messy goal, but it really tees up Arsenal's start, which, I said afterwards that I was very nervous coming into this game. I'm always very anxious watching Arsenal, but which is more a me thing than an Arsenal thing. I'm an anxious person. It's my driver in life. But I said to someone after, I can't even remember who I said it to afterwards, but I was like, after about 15 minutes, my anxiety totally went away. Like it completely went away and I was really calm watching. And I think it's not because at that point, 15 minutes into the game, I was convinced we were going to win. But I was thinking, whatever happens here, no regrets. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking, we're coming here with a performance. I can see it. And if it's not enough on the day, it's not enough. But I just had this feeling that even if we don't win the game, I can see that they're matching Lyon. They've come here to match Lyon. And, if they lose by the odd goal after this, I can compartmentalize it. And that completely made my nerves go away. And I'm just, because there's a big period between the first and second goals. And in hindsight, we might remember this game because we scored 4 goals, but actually 3 of them come quite quickly. There's quite a big gap between the first and the second. And I don't know about you, but even before those kind of clinching goals went in, I just really had this sense that Arsenal have got this. Is that how you felt?
Yeah, I'm with you, Tim. It's an interesting point you make about the gap between the goals because watching it like live on the television in this pub, I honestly thought they came like bang, bang, bang. And then I rewatched it this morning and there's a really big dragging like period and Lyon get a few good chances, but Arsenal are controlling the tempo. I really believe that Arsenal are controlling the tempo. I think Steph Catley and Leah Williamson just looked so much more calm on the ball than they did last week. I think in the first leg, you spoke about it with Renee Slagers about kind of, do you have to adjust when you play a team like this? You can prepare for it, but you don't know what you're facing until they get there. And it felt like this was a week of preparation. Like this team were ready with that week of preparation. They knew who they were playing and they were ready to kind of play their own style of football. And I think it was very obviously there from the minute that goal goes in, the Endler own goal. I think that Arsenal settle. but I think they were settled before that. The pressure was there, but it wasn't like, I think in the opening 10 minutes, to compare it to the opening 10 minutes of that Real Madrid game, the second leg of the Real Madrid game, I thought it was very strong. There was an aggressive press, but it was quite chaotic. I think in this game, it was very measured. I think there was an aggressive press, but I think I think Arsenal were really, really negating that. And yeah, I'm with you, Tim. It felt comfortable. It felt very comfortable. And I think that comes with Daphne van Domselaar, and I know we'll probably mention her a million times on this podcast, but I think that truly does come with Daphne van Domselaar. And I think Manu Zinsberger, Tim, you and I really do defend her. I think she's a phenomenal goalkeeper. She's too good to be a number 2 in the WSL, but Daphne van Domselaar has the ceiling to be the best goalkeeper in the world, and that's what we saw yesterday. I think Leah Williamson and Steph Catley playing with such calm on the ball, that's a product of your goalkeeper, and I think that just kind of trailed through the whole team, especially in the opening half.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to address something there on Van Domselaar. Look, there is a reason that Arsenal pushed her to be ready for this game. We reported that it was expected to be 5-6 weeks. I completely stand by that information. It came from good sources on all sides. So I completely believe that was the prognosis. And that Arsenal basically, and like I'm not saying this critically at all, but that Arsenal pushed for this, and there's a reason for that, and her distribution as well. I mean, she wasn't taking any of the goal kicks really, and I think that was a product of the injury. And I think you see from about 75 minutes, there's a kick out actually out of her hands at one point, and she can't do it because. Yeah, I don't know whether she had a pain-killing injection. I suspect she probably did, and maybe it was starting to wear off a bit. But there's a reason that Renee really wanted Daphne van Domselaar in goal for this game, and her distribution as well is just so calm, I think, and so collected. And yeah, like there are a few players I think we pushed to get fit for this game, but I'm with you. Like I think Daphne's just such a calming presence, and yeah. I like Manu Zinsberger. I think it reminds me, I'm going to use a men's team analogy here, but when George Graham signed David Seaman in the early 90s, Arsenal had John Lukic in goal. Everyone liked John Lukic. Everyone thought he was really good. And George Graham said, I think John Lukic is one of the best goalkeepers in the country. I just think David Seaman is the best goalkeeper in the country. And that's kind of how I feel about this. This is it's an upgrade. It absolutely is. So, and so Arsenal have control. We're going to come on to, I think, some of the players. No, let's do it now, actually, since we're talking about control of the game. One of the things maybe a lot of people, ourselves included, might have speculated on is, Kim Little and Mariona as a midfield pairing against your WSL low block makes all the sense in the world. It really, really does. But, we've had questions, and I think rightly so, about, but can you do that against Lyon? Can you do it against Chelsea? Well, we did it in this game. And I think you're right that the change Lyon make in midfield helps a bit. But honestly, even if Daniela van der Donk had been playing, I think let's start with Mariona. No, actually, because we're going to come on to her goal. Let's go with Kim. This was a performance for the ages, I think. And I spoke to Kim after the game, and I asked Renee a question about Kim. I don't usually ask about individual players with the manager, but I did ask about Kim. And Renee talked about how Leah had said in the huddle afterwards, had singled Kim out and said, this is really special because, this player really deserves this. And Renee said, that shows you that the players understand, that they saw how she performed on the day. And just one of the best individual performances I think I've seen.
There is no arguing with that, Tim. I think there's so much heart into this as well, because obviously Arsenal, last time they're in the Champions League final, it's 18 years ago. Kim Little signed 17 years ago. It's been a long drought of European success for the Arsenal Football Club since then. And for a player that has given so much heart into this club, I've seen a clip of Leah Williamson speaking after the game saying this is a player that deserves 7 or 8 Champions League titles, and she's finally going to get to wear the armband in one. And it's so special. And it would have been special no matter what, Tim. But the fact that she went to Lyon last night and put on that display makes it all the more meaningful. I just think the way she controls the ball in this game, and I think this is why she works so well with Mariona Caldentey, because I know we've always gone and we've loved the beloved Leah Volti, Kim Little pivot, but there is a sense of the fact that they're both quite anchored players, and Kim less so when she was maybe a bit younger, but now she sits a little bit deeper. And to have someone like Mariona as your partner, it allowed Kim to genuinely play like an Iniesta role. Like, she was the anchor, and she had every ounce of control on that pitch she was picking up. There's a moment where she gets the ball, it's Leona pressing very high, and she just takes a touch out to the wing, and she takes all the time in the world, and it's like the ball and the play and the press of Lyon slow down, and she's got all the time in the world. It is a vintage Kim Little performance, but I don't think it's what we expect when we expect from like prime Kim Little. We kind of expect her to be charging lines. She was an anchor, and I thought she was so superb. And then there's a moment in the second half which kind of seals the game. She goes to break forward on the counter attack. I think it's Damaris takes her down, gets a yellow card, and she kind of takes the foul, and she stands up. And that was a moment where I said, Arsenal were making the Champions League final. Like, it was a really big moment, and it wasn't even her best highlight of the game, but she breaks through in the transition. And this is a player that I just thought she was phenomenal, Tim. There's no words for how good she was. I think that her transition work with Mariona is so good because she covers so much of the midfield without having to move a lot of the ball around. Like Mariona, that is. She's just like very good at filling pockets and opening up space for other midfielders. And I think Kim is so intelligent that when a player is working that well with her, the fluidity is just brilliant. So in terms of just holding the ball up when it mattered, and I think it was in the second half where she just hits this really hard one-touch ball straight to Daphne van Domselaar, and I was like, that's world class. Like, that's world class to do that against Lyon. So yeah, Tim, I think we can speak about Kim Little a lot. I've been speaking about Kim Little with everyone I bloody know in my contact list today. And I think this is a performance we will remember as Arsenal fans forever, and it will be one that Kim Little should hold to her highest standard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a good reminder that she still has a lot to give this team. And there's a reason they look after her, that Renee looks after her so that she can play in these games. And, we were at open training on Friday and she wasn't there, but, that was about looking after her and making sure she was in the best condition. And every time a big game rolls around, Renee does that. And again, it's for a reason. And, I think really the kind of marriage of Kim Little and Mariona Caldentey wins this game, because we've spoken here about how Kim Little controls the game. She controls the pace and the tempo of it and the temperature. She knows when to pass backwards and when to pass forwards. But as much as you want to dominate space and dominate the ball and be tactically better than your opponent, you've still got to put the ball in the net. And right on half time, however well coached you are, and I think Arsenal are really well coached, I think this is a massive victory for Renee Slagers. I think my impression of this game is that Arsenal make the pitch much bigger when they have the ball, because we talked about how Lyon looked like they had a physical advantage last week, and I think Arsenal took that out of the equation. I think they made the pitch nice and big. I think that's why they wanted to start Chloe Kelly as well, have those real touchline wingers really spread out. But at the end of the day, no matter how well you're coached, no matter how well you play, talent is the thing that wins you games. And sometimes you just need someone to smack the ball into the top corner from 20 odd yards in a pressure moment. Right on half time, what Arsenal could have said, oh, this is all right, we'll play this half out. And, Arsenal kind of passing the ball around, pushing their food around the plate a little bit. And then Mariona just bends that ball into the top corner. And she has, I wrote about her today because I think the thing about Mariona that's really interesting is she didn't really replace anyone in the team. Like, Daphne's replaced Manu, right? Emily Fox has replaced Noelle and Laura Veenreuter. Like, there's been like some of that upgrading. But Mariona, we didn't have a player like that. And so we brought her in. And she's got the clutch gene as well. She's scoring big goals, against Real Madrid in the last round as well, against Bayern, putting the penalty away. And if you're going to go to a Champions League final and, fingers crossed, win a Champions League, you need players with that kind of talent. And that to me was the moment I knew we were going to win it.
World class. 0 Great British pounds we got Mariona Caldentey at the Arsenal Football Club for. Like, that is ridiculous. Tim, I agree. I think you can show up to these moments, these big games, these semi-finals at European, titles, and you can have a really cohesive squad that's well managed with an impressive young manager, but you need the world-class cutting-edge talent, and that's what cuts it above. I think in the Barcelona Chelsea semi-final, that was the difference. I think Chelsea have a fantastic squad. I'm going to be honest, I don't think they have a world-class talent. Naomi Goma will be there when she's not injury-riddled, but Mariona Caldentey is a cut above anyone in the WSL right now. I think Lauren James is another name that will be there. Mariona Caldentey is there. Like, she is a player that raises the levels of every single person around her. And I know we don't look into social media, but I thought it was so funny when, I think it was Leah Williamson, like, posts a photo and Mariona Caldentey's in the comment section last night saying, like, I told you so. And it's a player there that's like, she's gone and won it. She knows what it's like to be a Champions League winner. She knows what it's like to lift silverware, the World Cup. Like, this is a proven winner. But the fact that she takes this touch past Diani, she takes another touch, she's surrounded, not just by Lyon players, Arsenal players, to be able to find that space. She doesn't hit the ball hard. She literally finesses it from outside of the box into the top corner. A lot of players can't do that. Like, even if you put them on the edge of the box with no one around them, just the goalkeeper, they can't do that. Like, to do that in such a tight pocket of space, finesse that ball, she hasn't panicked, she's taken her step, she's breathed, she's put that top corner. Like, that is unbelievable. I think we kind of overlook this talent that we have, and I can't believe the fact that she plays for Arsenal. But again, we need to start maybe looking at it now and being like, hey, okay, we're a team that want to be like champions of Europe. We need to have this talent coming in, and it's so good. Because, look, I don't want to look ahead. We need to just relish in the moment right now. But, like, this is a Champions League final now. Arsenal are at a Champions League final. Chelsea aren't. We need to comment on that. Mariona Caldentey's come. There's world-class talent. This is really good for Arsenal as a prospect, as a destination in terms of this hub of talent. And I think Mariona is the prime example of that. But to get that goal before halftime was vital. To be fair, though, Tim, I wasn't that nervous because I think Arsenal, under Renee Slegers, have made a real habit of coming out stronger after halftime, something I don't think we used to see as much under Jonas Eideval. So I wasn't 1-1. I wasn't 2-2 it was. I wasn't nervous, but that extra goal, it kind of did feel like a sealed deal as much as that sounds like we were jumping the gun.
Yeah, at half time, I had this really conflicting feeling where I was like, I think we've got this. But at the same time, I still had that, but surely Lyon are going to go up a level. Surely they're going to make a change. Surely, like Lyon, even if they didn't have a manager, I'd be like, surely they're going to come out with better than that. Like, even if it's Wendy Renard giving the team talk. And what was really interesting in the ground is Lyon came out very early for the second half. They were out like 4 or 5 minutes early. And the dugout's down below us in the press box, and Joe had taken his blazer off, the sleeves were rolled up. You know, all of this spoke to maybe a bit of a bollocking had been administered. And I did think, like, surely, even if they don't tactically change anything, like, this is Lyon. Like I said, even independently of a coach or a game plan, like, surely they've just got a couple more levels and they're going to bring that. And that particularly now, like, that's the first time they're chasing this tie. Arsenal have been chasing it the whole time. All of a sudden, we're in that position. And within 30 seconds of the second half starting, a scrappy build-up to the goal. I've got to give big props to Caitlin Ford for her part in this. A very undervalued player, I still think, and someone who fights with that absolute life for every ball. And it comes to Alessia Russo, who, truth be told, was quiet in general, I think, across these two games. I'm still not sure if she's totally 100% fit. But great finish. And, 30 seconds into the half, if I thought the Mariona goal had put us well on the way, this was dreamland.
Thierry Henry finish as well. He's hit that across the body into the bottom right corner. It was just beautiful. No, the build-up's fantastic. I think it's Steph Catley that just sends the ball forward. I think when Lyon are trying to play this fast, football along the ground. They're coming out at the second half, first whistle, they're going to come out strong. They're going to try to play the ball forward. They're going to get it into the channels. I don't know if Steph Catley's actually just gone, get the ball away from me, or if she's actually said, we just need to break up this momentum, because you do. Sometimes you just need to crash that momentum. It's gone forward and it's fallen perfectly. It's actually a really good build-up. Although it's really scrappy, it's a great build-up. Caitlin Ford does like a great little turn and challenge to get that to Frida Maanum, who touches it first time. Takes a little bit of a deflection, but I think the players are aware of what they're doing, and then it's a beautiful finish. So as much as you can say that was not great from Lyon, and it wasn't great from Lyon, it's a great finish from Alessia Russo. And Tim, at this stage, I'm the only one sat at my table in the pub, because everyone else is getting pints. Actually, no, that's a lie. Someone next to me, Tom Ma from the halfway line, was next to me eating a pizza, and we just weren't ready for that to happen. But 30 seconds into the half, I was telling everyone, guys, get on Skyscanner. Let's go to Lisbon.
Yeah, and I think as well, maybe that goal showed that Wendy Renard wasn't 100% fit. Maybe it's just because I'm so used to her cleaning the ball up in those scenarios, but I could see after this that, like, for me in the first half, Lyon's tactical plan just wasn't very good, and I think they were a bit shocked by Arsenal, and I think they were shocked by the early goal. The second goal, it wasn't like the Mariona goal. It wasn't like coming or in the post or anything. It was still a pretty even game after that.
Mm-hmm.
After this Russo goal, I could see that they didn't believe. I really could.
Mm.
And even in the first half, one of the things I took a lot of encouragement from is I felt Lyon were falling on the floor a lot, looking at the referee.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a sign of a team in trouble, when they want the referee to help them.
Mm-hmm.
And, you keep going down and you keep like looking at the ref. Like, a team that is in control of the game doesn't do that. That's desperation. That's anxiety. And I saw it even more after this goal. And so, you get the third and you think, okay, it's going to be a sucker punch for Lyon, but 5-10 minutes, surely they're going to come back. And they just don't, really. I could see that they hadn't given up. I think you can tell that there's just an intangible sense when a team really believes something's going to happen and when they don't, and they create pretty much nothing. And then all of a sudden, Tiani Endler from a goal kick gives the ball to Vanessa Gilles, and she falls over. And I think, which is like just unfortunate for her, but I think what show, when you look back at this goal, you see how much the Arsenal press was on it, because it's not just Caitlin Ford there, Russo's there, Frida's there. Like, they both want the pass. They are both within a couple of yards, and I need to watch it back to see it. But Kim said to me afterwards they changed some details in the way they pressed. Arsenal forced a few chances from high turnovers in the first half. I think Kim Little had one on her left foot. I think Caitlin gets a shot off in the first half from a high turnover. I think Arsenal had Lyon's number in the build-up. On this occasion, it is just the centre-back slipping over. But I was delighted for Caitlin as well, because I thought she was a monster in this game. And at that point, I mean, I should have been on Skyscanner in hindsight, given how much the site's now paying for my flight. But, I mean, this started to feel like the 5-1 from a couple of years ago, didn't it?
Definitely. And I was actually going to say the same thing, Tim, about the fact that Vanessa Gilles, like, it was a very, very poor blunder. But I agree, there was a press there, and I was going to say, if Caitlin Ford had not put that shot away, I think there'd been a bit of an uproar from Alessia Russo and Frida Maanum, because they were in a prime position to put that away. It's a great finish, though. She's absolutely rattled the top of the net. But I think it goes to show the aggressive press, not in the way that it's just chaotic, and I think we see that a lot with Arsenal. They're very, very energetic with the press. It's so organised that it's so inevitable almost. Like that blunder from Vanessa Gilles, she's a great player. She had a poor game yesterday, but she's a great footballer. That doesn't happen very often, but it felt like Arsenal it's almost like they were ready for it. It's almost like they were expecting that. And I think it goes to show there's a lot of tactical differences between the Arsenal of old and the Arsenal view under Renee Slagers. And I think she's doing a lot better at making these mid-game adjustments. And I think Arsenal had the upwards momentum in the first half, but she was still able to kind of make these minor adjustments. And like I said earlier about that Steph Catley ball forward, there's still a press there. Arsenal were very ready on the transition, and that's a bit of a change to what we saw at the Emirates Stadium last Saturday as well. So I think this goal's another direct product of that. And I honestly thought, why don't we make it 5-1 at this stage? Because it was phenomenal. And it sometimes when you watch football, Tim, nothing goes your way. This game, Arsenal were great. Everything went Arsenal's way, and it was nice. It's a great day out when football and the football gods kind of align everything for you in the stars. But it felt like a moment where it was like, wow, hang on a second. This is actually happening. We've just made it 4-0. We're away from home against Lyon. There's a Champions League final against Barcelona. That at that stage, it was like, oh my God, what is actually happening here?
Yeah, and I have to say, it's a weird one because we'd have a better chance of beating Chelsea in the final, I think, but I don't think I could handle
100%.
an Arsenal v Chelsea Champions League final. Thank you very much. But Lyon do score in the end, and I did think this was coming a bit. There was, Daphne kind of made a bit of a mess of a kick out of her hands, which I think is down to the injury. There was, I think, Katie McCabe, who otherwise dominated Diani. And there was a question I asked her on Friday, actually. I asked her about finding that balance between getting forward but also respecting Diani's threat. I thought that was a one-on-one duel that McCabe won comfortably. Quite frankly, my only worry is that Lyon might come back for her with even more money this summer than they did last summer. But she had there was a ball down the line and she kind of slowed up and Diani caught her. And then there was a section where I think Frida could just put Stina Blackstenius through on goal and she kind of dawdles on it. And you just pick up those little signals of they must have been tired, but maybe this game's a bit done. De Mornay scores, bit of a sloppy goal. But after that, I felt a bit nervous where I was like, oh, we've given them something now. But even after that, if the 3 or 4 minutes before were a bit sloppy, you could see that Arsenal just switched straight back on and they just start playing, they just start doing passing drills with one another and see out the game.
Yeah, certainly. I think that Lyon goal's a bit annoying. It's annoying because, firstly, I had the Ellie Carpenter Le Clean Sheet meme ready to post, so that was really frustrating on my end. But mostly because De Mornay's actually alone and unmarked in the box for 15 seconds before she picks up that ball, that deflection. So it's kind of just you're dropping heads a little bit because the focus is lapsed. You're 4-0 up. You're almost already thinking about Portugal. So you can see why it leads that way. But I think, again, the mentality to shift back to this. The defensive unit was amazing, and I want to say it again. Leah Williamson, Steph Catley, Daphne Van Domselaar, Emily Fox, Katie McCabe, they were all just operating in a cohesive block, and we didn't see that last week. I think Arsenal put on a good display at Emirates Stadium. They should have gotten more than they did, but defensively weren't switched on, and I think the block weren't working together. This game, it was just heads were back on track as soon as they needed to be. And you mentioned this earlier about how kind of Lyon players were on the ground appealing a little bit more. Selma Batcher was doing that for the last 10 minutes, incessantly. I don't know if you were live in the stadium, go watch the replay because the last 5-10 minutes is just her pleading with the referee. And I think when you start to see that and then you begin to see Arsenal kind of passing the ball around in cohesion and there's a lot of calm, you're like, these teams are on different planets right now. The head and the mentality of these teams is on different planets right now. And I think to click back in, it's important. It's really, really important because I think Arsenal have had a history of crumbling, especially in the last 18, 24 months in terms of when one goes in. We don't know how headstrong the team are going to be. So I was nervous, but I wasn't that nervous. You can't blow a lead like that. And I think Arsenal were playing too well to even make that a possibility.
Yeah, and Arsenal deservedly see it out. And I don't think it was that anxious. In the end, and some great scenes in the stadium. Big shout out to the 500 Arsenal fans who flew over. Believe that's the most Arsenal have ever brought over from the UK for a European away game, and they were put right up in the back of the third tier, but still very much made themselves heard and seen. And I think the players really, really appreciated that. I was right over on the other side and I could hear them all along. But usually at the final whistle of a game, I make a dash kind of down to the press conference room, pretty sharpish. But on this occasion, I kind of just sat and tried to take it all in and tried to have a little look at scenes. And I think Kim Little and Leah Volti had a touching little moment together. And it's really nice because all the other players, everyone's hugging each other, but they all just kind of leave Kim and Wally alone to have a minute. And I was sat next to Freddie Cardi in the press box, and he kind of said, like, wow, what do you think of that? And I couldn't verbalize it. I was just like, I don't know what to say. And I was meant to do a voice note I did it in the end for the Arsenal Vision podcast, and I had to wait till the next morning because I was just like, I can't be coherent at the moment, quite frankly. And just huge emotions, and I think you could see that from the players. Before we go to the second half and for questions, is there a player perhaps we haven't talked about? Because I think this is just a day where everyone really deserves their flowers. Is there a player perhaps we haven't talked about that you think deserves a bouquet at this stage?
Yeah, I think we've given her a lot of bouquets over the years, but I'm going to give mine to Katie McCabe for this game. I think that from minute one, she switched on and she's playing very, very, like, she plays for the cannon on her shirt, and it was very evident in this game. But something I thought was really, really strong, and I asked Katie about this on Friday, about kind of what she's learnt about herself in these 2 years between that Wolfsburg semi-final that she captained and this game, because obviously we know her fiery personality on the pitch, and I was just curious to see tactically off the pitch what she's learnt about herself. And she said, like, I work a lot with Renee and with Aaron Dantino about like tactics side, and I really want to learn the tactical stuff and I want to improve. And when I asked Renee about that, she echoed that sentiment and said, like, she thinks that Katie McCabe is one of the most tactically switched on players she's ever worked with. And in this game, you've obviously seen the first leg. She's played against Diani. Diani's gotten the better of her. Lyon have gotten the better of Arsenal, defensively and on the transition as a whole. But that first goal, Katie McCabe's too far high up the pitch. She's kind of pressing at the wrong times. This game was completely different. She's making the run in when she needs to. She's inverting when she needs to. She's pressing up the channel when she needs to. And defensively, I think she was so sound. So I think that just goes to show this is a player that wants to learn, and that goes so unrecognized. I think we think of Katie McCabe as someone that just plays with passion, and we forget about her intelligence. And she's such an intelligent player. And I think we saw that, and I was just so impressed by her. I was so impressed by her. And yeah, it's just great to see. Because this, again, she's not English. She's not from North London, but she's one of us. You can almost claim her as one of Arsenal's own. She's grown up at this club, and I think she deserves it just as much as everyone else does. And I was so pleased with her performance yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a few players who've been at the club for a few years who really deserve this. The player I think I'll pick out is the other fullback, Emily Fox. I know some questions were asked after the first leg. I mean, she is, the first goal, albeit it's so close to actually being offside, but she's a long way behind defensive line. I think it was quite strange that people pin the second goal on her when she runs over from right back all the way over to left centre back to try and challenge De Mornay and nearly manages it. Like, I think that's guilt by association because she'd run over. But across these two legs, Selma Basha and Chawinga haven't had a kick. Haven't seen either of them in either of these legs, and this was just a business performance from Emily Fox, which I think we're quite used to be honest. But I think what this really showed is that Emily Fox is one of those players who should be playing Champions League finals, who'll probably play several World Cup finals in her career and all of that. And she was just, I thought, not just immense, but she just looked comfortable. It's just like, yeah, this is my level. She could play for any team in the world, absolutely no doubt. And, after some questions in the first leg, I thought that was very much put to bed. And yeah, like for a player like Chawinga to be completely anonymous across two games, I think that says everything. So Emily Fox for me is my kind of unsung hero of the game. We're going to take a break there, and we will come back in part 2 with your questions right after this. Okay, so welcome back to the Arsenal Women Arsecast. Looking back on Sunday's 4-1 win over Lyon in Lyon, and Arsenal qualifying for the Champions League final. And as ever, we've taken questions on Bluesky, and I didn't want to go into too many about the final, Jamie, just because I think there's going to be time for that, and we're going to have a big run up at it. Not least because there's 2 weeks between the last game of the WSL season and the final. But I do think we had a lot of questions about this kind of dynamic of Arsenal turning things around, not just in the second leg, but even the Bayern game, which in the group stage, which effectively was a kind of two-legged tie as well. We had loads, but I'll pick two. One from Ella at YR-AWFC. Do you think the pattern we've established of losing in the first leg and coming back in the second says something about our team? And do you think it weakens our chances in the final? And Aidan Richards, Arsenal's success in the Champions League this season has been rooted in excellent second legs. And Aidan includes the Bayern Munich game in that. Games rather. Do we need to make any adjustments or change our approach for a single game final? What do you think about this dynamic? Do you think there's anything in that?
Yeah, look, I don't want to overanalyze it a lot. It has happened 3 times in one Champions League campaign, however, so it's clearly a pattern. 3 times is not a coincidence. I think that if you want to look at it from a side where you can praise the team, I think it actually really does go to show the mentality that Rene Segers has brought to this club, to this team. I think there is a team right now that are playing with such freedom. And again, like something I asked Rene about before the Lyon press conference was how she kind of learns from the players. Like she's a new coach, she's a new head coach in terms of playing European football as well. So what do you learn from the players? And she says there's 45 minutes every morning where I really speak to the players, and I value that. It's my protected personal time to speak to these players, to grow these personalities. And I think you see that in this Arsenal team, and that transpires in the way that their mentality is so strong, because it feels like when your head coach is really valuing you as a person, as a brain, like a football brain, and as a player, you then have this confidence instilled in you. And look, you can kind of take the adversity, you can take the knockbacks, and you can grow from them. So if you want to look at it from a good side, I think there's a lot of praise that can be done about these kind of the remontadas, so to speak. Lol, Jude Bellingham. Anyway, I think there's like a lot of praise to go in that. I think if you're looking at it in isolation to a final with Barcelona, if Arsenal are to lose this final against Barcelona, I don't think it's because it's not across 2 legs. If anything, you don't want to play Barcelona across 2 legs. We've learnt that, from Chelsea over those 2 legs. That was very, very poor. 8-2 in the end. You don't want to play a team like that across 2 legs. I think it's too small a sample size to make these massive judgments. We saw it against West Ham in the WSL as well. I know that was one game. There is a sense that this team can come back. And I want to just use that as a good thing, because I think, Tim, you might be able to give us some more analysis on the negative side, but I think if a team has the mentality to kind of learn from a mistake, take the adversities, take the knockbacks and roll with them, that's a sign of a great team. That's a sign of a really good team that is building something special. And look, I don't think if we lose in Lisbon, it's because it's 1 leg. I think it's because it's Barcelona.
Yeah, definitely. I think cup competitions are quite isolated and weird, and these things just happen. And I bet you it doesn't happen next season, and we'll never talk about it again. I kind of think it's probably a bit of a coincidence. I also think that if it was, I'd maybe, insofar as like the final is still part of this run and all of that, maybe it would be a thing, but not when we're playing Barcelona for the reasons that you outline. But I also think Barcelona is a totally different game. It's almost not a tactical game against Barcelona. I don't think, we're going to have to play we're going to be forced to play a very different way. Do you have a question for me?
I do. We've spoken a little bit about the midfield, but this one's from Becca Darby. There were lots of fair questions and criticism of the midfield after the first leg. What was the biggest difference there yesterday in your view? And then following off on one specific player, Lucy566 says, obviously a great performance. I would ask what you made of Frida's performance. I thought, especially in those 10 minutes or so before the Lyon goal, she gave the ball away a lot when we were in good positions. So what do you kind of make of Frida as a part of that midfield group, and what were the main differences in the positive aspect?
As we said in the first half, I do think the change Lyon made helped. I think we adjusted our pressing for this game. I need to go back and watch it again to see exactly what was done, but they definitely changed the way they pressed a bit. And I think Frida was very, very crucial to that, because Frida's job in the press is basically to cover 2 players. So, when Arsenal are off the ball, they're in more of a 4-4-2. Frida's that second striker. So she kind of covers one of the centre-backs and one of the full-backs, and, kind of tries to stand and the defensive midfielder. So I think she blocked a lot going into Damaris as well. I think one of the big weapons that Lyon have. And to be fair, they did it once in the first half where I think Katie McCabe kind of fouled Diani, is that Wendy Renard diagonal, which is, if you've been watching women's football for the last decade, like that's a very familiar move. Wendy Renard whacking the ball, like Virgil van Dijk style, whacking the ball over to the right wing. And I think Frida stopped a lot of that. And the way she kind of drifts over to the right as well. Like, I think Frida, I don't want to get too like wanky about this, but I do think Frida does a lot of things that maybe a coach appreciates more than fans. Which is not to say I don't, like I've said before, she's a bit Trossard from the men's team for me. She's she's streaky in terms of her end product, definitely. But I mean, I think, and I do, we've had the conversation so many times about, we're like Arsenal are a double pivot team and then they have a 10, but like, should it be more like a 6 and 2 8s or a tighter midfield 3? But I totally get it. Like like she should have just put Stina Blackstenius through on goal, like definitely. And there are times when her touch could be cleaner and things like that. But I think she's just such a, like her physicality in that position, particularly out of possession, is so important. So I think she had a really strong game here. I'm not going to lie and say I think that she was on Kim and Mariona's level in this game, but that's more to do with Kim and Mariona being on a level that I don't think there are many players in the world that are capable of. I think Frida was a very kind of capable deputy to that did a lot of kind of uncelebrated work. But yeah, I felt that Renee was totally vindicated. And again, like I said in the first half, to Jess's point on counter press, like she could have scored 2 goals in the first leg. And I think the manager's probably got a right to say, well, I didn't make a mistake there. She just missed 2 really bloody easy headers. So I think Frida Maanum was a big part of this. And yeah, like I say, I think the Lyon decision helped. And I think the way Arsenal spread out a little bit more in this game, I think really helped as well and helped pick up some spaces. How about this one? I guess a slightly similar question, and it's from Pfizer 6 with several A's in there. After the first leg, I Googled the pitch size for Lyon Stadium, and it's exactly the same as the Emirates, which I feel we thrive on. It seemed we're able to find so much more space to create chances in the second leg as opposed to the first leg. What do you think tactically changed between both legs?
Yeah, 100%. I think that it looked bigger, didn't it, Tim? Like the Groupama looked so much bigger yesterday than the Emirates looked, and that just goes about how Arsenal played. I think Arsenal again, I don't want to speak a lot about the goalkeeper, but I've seen a lot of questions about the kind of confidence that Daphne instills in the team. And I think there's a flow-on effect, and be ignorant to think there's not a flow-on effect. When your defenders and your ball users, your pivot, have that kind of stability of knowing that you've got a great goalkeeper behind you, they allow themselves to have more time on the ball. And I think that really opens Arsenal up here. I think that Katie McCabe and Emily Fox make the pitch really wide without going forward too much. Like they really, really, really make the pitch super wide without kind of pressing forward. And often we see when Emily or Katie go up high, it makes the pitch look very narrow because we've got such an attacking force. But I think they really take the press out wide. It allows Steph and Leah to kind of drop in that area. And that's why Kim's able to play such an anchored role because there's so much space for her in the midfield. So I think the fullbacks, they're almost a little bit more disciplined in holding back. They still pick their moments. They both had some really attacking shows. But in that game, in the first leg at the Emirates, it felt like every time the ball bobbled in the channel in Arsenal's final third, it was Emily Fox on the end of it. This game wasn't like that. It was Caitlin Ford, it was Chloe Kelly on the end of it. It wasn't Emily Fox. It felt like we let the wingers stay high and we let the fullbacks stay wide, so it made the pitch very, very big. I think Beth Mead in the first leg, I actually praised her a lot and I thought she was fantastic. I can't lie, I thought she was the best player on the occasion. But she drops back and she defends a lot to help Emily, which is a good thing, but it makes the pitch seem really congested and small. Whereas this game, it felt like Chloe Kelly and Caitlin Ford are playing a high aggressive pressing role. Fullbacks are kind of opening up the pitch, and then you've got Mariona free to do her work. Kim's the anchor, Arsenal were really stretching Lyon, and then it made it look so much fluid. It made it look so much bigger. That's really funny because I was actually going to say to him, is it a bigger pitch? And I'm glad that Pfizer 6 has come through with that one, because I agree. The pitch looked massive. I don't know if it was because it was television, but I think Arsenal just did such a good job at positionally stretching Lyon into a bigger shape.
Yeah, coaches have a saying when they set their teams up about a team needs width and depth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what you saw. Arsenal had width and depth in this game. And I think it was a Ukrainian coach, Valery Labanovsky. He talked about, it's like the 1950s, he was talking about how a good team's like an accordion. And when they have the ball, they spread out. And then when they don't have the ball, they bunch up and they make the pitch smaller. And I think we saw a lot of those principles from Arsenal. Question for me.
Yes, this is actually also from our friend Pfizer with many 8-6. This says, do you think yesterday's match was a case of Arsenal playing so well that we made Lyon look bad? Or rather, Arsenal played well and Lyon played bad as well, which made us look even better? Do you think it was a case of Lyon playing the game into Arsenal's hands, or do you think that Rene Slegers really outcoached Joe Montemuro?
So I think a bit of both here, definitely. I do think I'm going to use this question as an anchor for saying, we've talked about not just the 11 players that came on as well, everyone that contributed to this. But for me, this is a massive victory for the manager. And one of the reasons that Arsenal are good at coming back is because Rene is really good at assessing what happens and responding to it and being proactive about it. And I've just seen so many smart things from her that are not always immediately kind of that people might not always immediately appreciate, like the increased fluidity. Mm-hmm. Deep blocks no longer a problem for Arsenal, and then like little things like when we play Liverpool and Everton and all of their defenders are like 6'8", it's like, okay, all the crosses are going along the floor then. Mm-hmm. And the way she reduced Lyon's physicality in this game, I think the big reason Arsenal come back is it. Of course, it's down to the mentality of the players. We always attribute those things to those kind of intangible qualities, and obviously you need them. But it's tactical as well. It's because, in my view, I think we were a really smart coach who, over a two-legged game can really look at things. And ultimately, I mean, look, Lyon made a change and it didn't work. Arsenal made some tweaks, basically, some little tweaks that like you have to squint to see just the way they built up, and you analysed it really well there about, keeping those wingers high, keeping those fullbacks wide, not getting drawn into too much the areas where Lyon are really strong and they can run through you. Like, look at their second goal. In the first leg, they just power through the middle. So Arsenal didn't really play in that area. They kept the pitch nice and wide so that if and when turnovers happened, it wasn't De Mornay like powering through the middle of the team. And so I think ultimately the answer is I think Arsenal have a really good coach. I really, really do, who has a really high ceiling and who's still young and learning as well. So that's my answer to that one, basically, is, Rene Hive, rise up, essentially, because she deserves her flowers. She got this really, really bloody right. How about this one? Which one was I going to ask? Talked about Frida. Okay, yeah, let's have like a kind of a wider question about what all of this means. And this is from Toki Bun Buns, who is not Bunny Shaw, as they're keen to point out. I wouldn't be so keen to point that out, to be honest. I wouldn't mind being confused with Bunny Shaw. Not the final yet, but what does this mean for Arsenal going forward? How can this affect investment and recruitment in the summer, and players now seeing what Slegers and the club are capable of? And do you think it will make more high-profile players willing to move to the club?
Yeah, I touched on this really, really shortly before, but I think this does make a difference, Tim. It would be silly to say it doesn't in terms of player recruitment. I think there was a really big concern over the January transfer window, and we got so many questions at the time about how, having an interim head coach, Rene didn't get confirmed until halfway through January, is the permanent solution to that issue, how that kind of affects bringing in solutions, and we don't know what happened with that Kira Walsh deal specifically and whether that was a reason. But look, we all saw that transpire on the weekend, but we'll leave that aside. I think it's clear that there was an issue there with, okay, what's the future of Arsenal right now? Where's this manager going to be? How's she going to kind of work the team to play? Right now, the team are going to a Champions League final with a pretty much an unproven manager. She was great in the Damesvenskan, but she's an unproven manager in terms of world-class top teams. So for prospect, for world-class players, you've got a young manager who's clearly up and coming. She has taken this Arsenal team to a different level. If you look at, I know we're not going to analyze the WSL table, title race is over, blah, 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 whatever. But if you look at even just the WSL in isolation, since Renee Segers has taken charge, Arsenal are first in points in the WSL. They're first in goals scored. They're first in clean sheets. She's dominating that league, right? There's one loss to Chelsea involved there. It's a shaky penalty in a cagey game at Stamford Bridge. This is a manager that has the foundations to be an excellent tactician. You then partner that with the fact that she's clearly doing it right in terms of the player welfare, having these conversations with the personalities, mitigating kind of how you manage bigger personalities, smaller personalities. All these players are playing with such freedom. You then add Mariona Caldentey, a world-class Champions League player who's come to Arsenal, has seen the vision at Arsenal before this has even happened, and then you add a Champions League final into the mix. This is a very good situation for Arsenal to be in heading into the summer. It's also a very good situation. I know we shouldn't base it off our WSL rivals, but Chelsea have just been battered in the semi-finals. They've made a lot of high-profile signings in January. They've spent a lot of money. It hasn't worked out. Again, I think Naomi Girma will work out. I don't want to say that won't, because it will. They spent a lot of money. There's not a lot of space in that squad. I think there's a lot of space in this Arsenal squad. I think it's an attractive place to be. Chelsea have gone and bought Sonia Bonpastor in to win the Champions League, right? Arsenal bought Renee Segers in as an interim head coach, and she's taken them to the Champions League final. She's a young manager. I think it would be silly to think that this situation isn't attractive for players. It's attractive for investment. We know the club care about their women's team. We're not trying to convince the board, and we're not trying to convince fans that you need to watch the Arsenal women. We have that on our side. It can go deeper. It can be greater. But there's a project here, and I just hope to God that it's handled well behind the scenes. And I think you've also got Andrea Berta. I don't know what he's going to do for the women's team, but he's already watching the men's training. Like, he's very proactive in that space. There's a director now that really, really is looking to make a mark on this club. I think it's also just a great time to be an Arsenal fan, and I think that has knock-on effects to the women's team, Tim, because the men are obviously playing PSG. I think when everyone's listening to this, it will be tonight, so I hope you're all feeling okay. Bloody hell. But it's a good time to be an Arsenal fan. I think a lot of men's fans were watching the women yesterday, and the women's fans are obviously watching the men's. It's one club. I think this is a place that the players are going to want to come to. I think the men's team being there as well it's attractive for players. There's one club here, so it's really good. It's really bloody good that Chelsea aren't in that final, and it's very good that we are. So, yeah, I've rambled a little bit, but I think this is an exciting project. If I was a world-class player, I'd want to be playing under Renee Segers.
Absolutely.
Okay, there's actually a couple of similar ones, so I'm going to kind of mash them all up. This is one from Elise. How does the team approach the 2-week break between the end of the WSL and the final? Usually we're rusty when coming back from break. Should we expect some sort of behind closed doors friendlies? LMF33 has said, how do Arsenal get ready for the final when there is 2 weeks between the WSL finishing and the Champions League final taking place? And then Bobby Chakraborty has said, does the manager go fully into resting certain players for the Champions League now? So, Tim, how does kind of Renee Segers and the group manage these final weeks of the WSL with the Champions League final in 25 days? Not that I'm counting.
So I think first off, I mean, obviously there's still a job to do in the WSL, and I think it'd be very disappointing to slip from second place at this point. I think in terms of resting players, I think no. Maybe for the Villa game. I can't believe this Villa game's happening. There's another, like Renee's doing another press conference Tuesday afternoon, and it's like, I'm not ready for this. I need more basking time. So maybe for the Villa game, maybe some of those players that were maybe pushed a bit to come back from injury. I wouldn't like to see Russo, Chloe Kelly. I definitely don't want to see Daphne maybe in any of the games, to be honest, because I think it's different for a goalkeeper physically. Mm-hmm. There's not as much need to keep them ticking over. And I do think that she came back early, put it that way, to play in this game. But overall, I think particularly the Brighton and Manchester United games will be very valuable, not just because of the WSL, but as a tune-up. Like, you cannot, like the question about, do we go into fully resting players? No, I do not want this team taking on Barcelona when they haven't had a game for 3.5 weeks. Like, we put the Leicester game where we put it for a reason, and that's because they didn't want to go into the Lyon game cold. And yeah, some of those questions about the 2-week gap, I guess it's the same for both teams. So it is something to deal with. I wouldn't be surprised. I have no idea, but I wouldn't be surprised if they like played a little match against the under-21s or something. Albeit the under-21s, I think their season's finished. So, maybe they'll do something like that. But it's difficult to get opponents at this stage of the season because all their seasons have finished. And, particularly teams who might have internationals at the Euros or even ones that don't, like, they're not going to, they're all going to be in, like, Ibiza or whatever. They're not going to want to play at London Colney. So I'm not sure what the art of the possible is there. They may just do like an internal game, like an 11 against 11 or something like that. But yeah, it's something to manage, but it's something to manage for Barca as well. So I think that's definitely a press conference question I'm going to ask if someone else doesn't get there before me before the end of the season, because I am really interested in that preparation, even psychologically. Like 2 weeks is a big run up at such a big game, so there's going to be something to psychologically manage. But no, like particularly Brighton and Manchester United, we can't be resting players. We've got a job to do. The players will need the minutes anyway. Yeah, maybe like you can see we're already looking after some players like Kim not training on particular days. I know that's been the case for Emily Fox for a lot of the season as well. So, this is the point where the S&C coaches really, really earn their money. Okay, let's do one more each. Actually, no, let's end on this one. I think this is going to be a really good question to end on, really getting to the nitty-gritty that we haven't really got to yet and we haven't discussed. And this is from Izzy.
What you're going to ask.
At Izzy38. And we have had flavours of this question a lot during the season, but there's a lot. Izzy says there's a lot to say about the football, but Renee has a huge decision to make in Lisbon. Does she stick with the trusty club trackie or suit up for the big day? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But on the other hand, a special final feels like a time for her to dress up for the occasion. Thoughts?
Can I preface this with the fact that when Renee Slegers walked out last week at Emirates Stadium with a ponytail instead of a bun, I absolutely nearly left the stadium. I was like, it's over. What is she doing? Now's not the time to experiment. I actually think I sent that in several group chats. Like, what is she? Why is she changing up the hairstyle? We're in Champions League semi-final, for God's sake. So that didn't settle me. However, she went back to the bun. We won. So I think that it would be disrespectful to wear a club trackie to a Champions League final. Like, I think it's like kind of, I would praise her and I would be very impressed, but I feel as if now's the time, Renee. Like, it's the last game of the season, suit up. If your hair's in a bun, that's all I care about. I couldn't care less what you're wearing, but I do think she needs to honour the occasion. I'd like to see a chic suit, like maybe like an all black moment, white shirt. And maybe an Arsenal pin. That's what I'm envisioning. Tim, tell me yours.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether like the club might commission suits or whatever, which they did for the Conti Cup final in 2020. It might be club led by that. There might be like a sponsorship opportunity. If there isn't, I think she's going to wear the trackie because that's what she always does. And a little bit like, and I do think there's a semi-serious point there that she's always done that and dressed the same as all the coaching staff. And, one of the things she said in the press conference last night was, I'm not separate from the team. I am part of the team. I think she's really trying to create that both with her staff as well and with the players. So I do think there is something a little bit coded in her doing that and not wanting to separate herself from the group. So I think unless there's like some kind of suit commissioned or something, I fully expect to see the trackie. I have to say, I do think it's important to her. I really do. And maybe she just loves the colours. I don't know. Maybe next season when they change the colours, she'll ditch it. But I do think there's a semi-serious point in there about her like presenting as, as part of the team, which I think is interesting because I don't think she did that at Rosengård. So obviously her thinking's changed. But I think, Jamie, I'm going to end on this, which was kind of a question, but I don't think it is a question, but I want to say it because I think it's important. And it's from @Loza93. And they ask, can you contextualize how big an achievement this is? I mean, yeah, huge. I would say in terms of 2007, for people not familiar with the context there, Arsenal were as big underdogs in 2007 as they will be for this final. And it was over 2 legs. So if you can imagine Arsenal playing Barca over 2 legs and winning 1-0, that's about what Arsenal did in 2007. So like, the context there is that Arsenal were massive underdogs and it was a huge achievement. But Loza goes on to say, I feel sometimes we forget to live in the moment. I'm not sure if you agree, but in my opinion, given all the circumstances, this is our biggest result in several years and should be revelled in accordingly. And Loza93, I couldn't agree more. And I think, Jamie, that's exactly how we should end it.
100%. I think that we need to just relish in this next month as Arsenal fans, step away from being Arsenal analysts and journalists and just think this is a club that have been through a lot of roller coaster action this week, this past week, the month before that, this whole season. I think this is a team leading from the heart right now. They're playing from the heart and we're in a Champions League final and we need to remember the magnitude of that achievement.
Amen to that. And on that note, we will probably do another podcast. I don't think we'll do one after the Villa game. Maybe we will. I don't know. Maybe we'll do one after the Villa game, but if not, definitely after the Brighton game. I haven't thought of the Villa game. Actually, my accreditation came through this morning and I was like, oh yeah, that's happening on Wednesday. So yeah, I mean, that's going to be an interesting game in itself, really, but and maybe will take us out of the moment. But, look, if you're listening to this, it's probably Tuesday, maybe even Wednesday, but it's not Wednesday night. We're recording this on Monday night. So forgive us if our mind stays with the fact that Arsenal beat Lyon and they're in the Champions League final. So obviously we will do a lot of content in the build up to that and around that and everything like that. And we're hatching plans at the moment. But really, I just hope that you all enjoyed that as much as we did and continue to enjoy it for the next few days. And we'll be back in a few days' time, at least, to talk about probably some slightly less exciting games, but that's okay. Thanks for being with us, and we'll speak to you very soon.